22nd of August 2023. This is another one of that Let's Talk Skidmarks of mine, and I'll be talking about BRICS again. Early this morning I received this message from Mr. X, and he referred me to the redacted article about the changes that is happening in the world, and the article focuses on how the BRICS currency will affect the dollar and things like that. And his comment on the video is, good morning South Africans. Could we as South Africans be waking up to a beginning of a new world order, not 666? A key defining moment in a great global reset, not IMF WEF reset project. A great reset back to basics, back to gold-backed currencies, back to Ubuntu. All questions. Now, as I have mentioned in other Skidmarks, I was invited to a think tank in which the people there, the participants, were talking about the changes needed for South Africa and all things of that, and their ideas of the future. The guy leading it is really knowledgeable and well qualified, and he understands the value of education and the reality that you need skilled people to drive an economy. But most of the other members of that think tank, one thing that is clear is that the communist ideology is firmly seated in their minds. They see communism as the future for South Africa. And I have asked some questions about some of the things that they suggested and some of the solutions that they suggested. And I asked simple questions, and that raised some angry responses. And then I did that skidmark about the ANC councillors that allow the municipalities to steal the pension contributions of their members. And I said it is stupid to allow it, and they are stupid to allow things like that. And that got a fiery response from Mr. X, and he shat all over me about it, calling them stupid and I don't know what. I was kicked out of the think tank, and what for me that was actually amusing was he was deeply offended by the fact that I called them stupid for allowing that theft, but he was not offended by the theft. Now that says a lot. So, but that's where I am. So I'm not going to name this think tank, and I've been asked, many people asked me about it. I won't name it because I will not promote it, I'm not part of it, and I've had no insight in it. But what I have seen is that they are firmly committed to communism. Not all of them, but the most vocal ones are firmly committed. They believe in things like state farms, and they want to expand state education. And what I cannot understand is, if you look at what happened now at that school there in Joburg with that dreadlocks, because it's against the school rules, it was turned into a hell of a racism thing, and the school has been now closed down by the Gauteng Department of Education. Now what is sad is that that school was offering very good education to mostly black people. And all those black kids are now robbed of that opportunity. They will find themselves either not finding a spot in another school or end up in one of those dilapidated black schools where nothing happens really. And we see this first question that he asked here is a great reset back to basics. Now, I am not so sure what are these basics that he's talking about, but if I look and listen to what is going on in social media, to them the basics is that all whites must be destroyed and removed from the country, and all white property must be given to the masses. That is basically what they see as back to basics. They do not understand the realities of that. If you want to build a business, you actually have to have the skills and then commit and work hard at it. We see some black youngsters trying to establish themselves and trying to participate in the economy, and the moment that their businesses start taking off, blacks will loot their premises, kill the owners, destroy everything there. That is, now it seems to me, that is the basics that he's talking about. Destruction. Everything must be destroyed. The railways must be destroyed. The schools must be burned down. Libraries must be burned down. Municipal buildings, record centers, everything must be burned down. So it seems to me that is their idea of back to basics. And then he talks about back to gold-backed currencies. Now, in my opinion, most of the blacks that are so supportive of this BRICS bank and the BRICS currency doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. They've got illusions of they will all of a sudden find themselves with valuable currency in their hands. And that is an illusion. Because the reality of the BRICS currency is it is just a trading mechanism between the countries. It's got nothing to do with the people walking the streets. And the fact that that currency will be gold-backed and commodity-backed means that they cannot just print currency. If they want to print more, they must have those assets in stock and under their control to back that currency. Contrary to what the Americans are doing, they're just printing. And their whole currency system is based on basically debt. So that American dollar is actually worthless if you think about it objectively. And then he mentions back to Ubuntu, and me and him has had arguments about this Ubuntu thing of his. He's extremely committed to Ubuntu, and he was the one that told me that one of the things that impressed him about the Boere was the fact that they adopted the Ubuntu. And I said to him, you must understand that the basic principles of Ubuntu correlates with the basic principles of the Bible. And that is why it is a natural thing. And if you look and you see how white people, yes, white people, are everywhere involved in community upliftment programs. They help schools, they help clinics, they help the health guys. If there's a disaster, the black communities can always see there's white people there helping them to get some food, helping them to get order back in their community. And for white people, Ubuntu is basically a cultural thing. But the Ubuntu that the black people are talking about, they claim to be committed to Ubuntu, but then they say, kill the whites. And I asked him, how do you justify that destruction of an ethnic group, but you rely on Ubuntu? And he couldn't really respond to it. There was a few efforts, but it's hollow. And then he added this to that post that he sent to me. What is in it for South Africa? How will BRICS help us advance our own self-interest as a country? Overall, what are the pros and cons of our government strengthening ties with BRICS? Now, for me, and I am a firm supporter of BRICS, but my support of BRICS is based in my intrinsic view of life that you must always be on the lookout for opportunities. And the BRICS bloc offers a lot of opportunities to South Africans for the simple reason that in that BRICS bloc, the playing field is fairly level there. People are competing fairly. The competition is not controlled by the Western threats of sanctions and bombs and all of that. It is just about trade and how to better the lives of the peoples of the countries. So for me as a boer, I'm excited about the opportunities that is in BRICS. But the downside of it is that our industrial base has been destroyed, so we cannot contribute anything on the BRICS table. One of the things that we are depending on is the export of our raw materials, which is, under the apartheid regime, the steel was processed here, the iron ore was processed here, everything was processed here locally, and finished ingots were placed on the market and so forth. So value were added to that, and then it was exported. That has disappeared. The ANC made sure of it that those big industrial production operations were killed. And the reasons I'm not going to talk about in this Skidmark. So we don't have much to offer on an industrial base. And then there's some people in that think tank that makes a big story of the big asset that South Africa has in its population numbers. But what they do not take into consideration is that that population number, which they see as a valuable asset in the production base, what they don't take into consideration is that the bulk of that population sector that they're referring to is unemployable because they are uneducated. And I spoke about it in a previous Skidmark where the economist did an investigation, and 80% of 10-year-olds cannot read a sentence in any language and understand that sentence. So that mass, which they call an asset, is actually a major liability because that mass cannot be productive, simply because they're unskilled. And then you see deliberate destruction of the education system. And the ANC has done that, of course, under guidance from their XXX masters. They've done it, and they have effectively destroyed the black education system. They are now trying to destroy the remnants of the education system, the white schools, the previously Model C schools, and so they want to destroy that as well. And this Bella Act is a clear indication that the ANC is totally committed to destroying all education opportunities for children. But yet these blacks support them because they think that affirmative action will protect them. Affirmative action will ensure that they will progress. But the reality is, if you go back to the basics in nature, it is the strongest males in an animal herd that breeds. And it's not only that they get the opportunities because they're strongest, it's also a fact that the females are selecting the strongest ones, not the weakest ones, the strongest ones. And that is how they ensure the survival of the species. Affirmative action has made it possible for really stupid people to be in charge of the country. You look at people like Mbalula, what is that? I would like to know what that guy's IQ is really. And the fact of the matter is, these people are the ones that are managing the economy, not the brightest minds in the black community. No. They are immediately labeled as clever blacks or Oreos or Uncle Toms and shit like that, because the black population are their own biggest enemy. They fear excellence. They do not appreciate excellence. They do not recognize excellence. I don't know why, but it must be a cultural thing. And then he says, how will BRICS help us advance our own self-interest as a country? BRICS is not going to help us advance. BRICS is actually going to push South Africa back into the dungeons of oblivion, because the BRICS nations, the bulk of them, are growing and upcoming nations. Go and look what Iran has achieved under severe Western sanctions. Look at what they have achieved for them as a country. Look at what is happening in the Middle East in general. And all these countries are focused and interested in bettering the lives of their citizens and are looking for trading opportunities and so forth. And then you get a crazy situation here in South Africa where we are buying our oil and gas and diesel from Russia, not at the advertised Brent prices of $80 a barrel, $80 plus. We're buying at below 60, and I have handled it as in a previous Skidmark, but the cabal here in South Africa is charging the shit out of us for fuel. Who's making that profit? Where is that profit going? There are guys that has done this calculations, they're more informed than me. It says that our diesel price, based on the fact that we're buying the diesel from Russia, our diesel price at the pump should be in the vicinity of 14 Rand a litre. Then there is in that 14 Rand is included 100% markup for taxes and all that for the government. But yet we're paying about 24 Rand. And the citizens take it. So I cannot see how they think that BRICS will advance our own self-interest, because our self-interest in South Africa is an interest in destruction. The interest of the ANC is to destroy the country. They are destroying everything. And the schools are now in the final throes, the health system is in the final throes. And the questions I have is, what do these black people, the black majority, they call themselves the majority, what do they think is going to happen to that majority population when the health system finally collapses? What is going to happen to that majority population when the SASSA grants finally collapse? Because it will. The country is running out of money. We're trying to make some money with the export of our raw materials. But then you go and you look at the fuck up in Transnet, and the harbors are not operational. I spoke to a guy that is in the shipping business, and he said to me, a ship that was supposed to load fresh produce in East London, I think in East London or in PE, one of those harbors there, the ship couldn't get into the harbor for 10 days. So the farmers' produce was standing on in the queue with the containers of fruit in it for 14 days. By the time the ship docked, that whole shipment had to be tossed away because it was rotten. This is what we have from black majority rule. And then they talk a lot about participating in the BRICS bloc. They cannot, because they cannot provide anything. We don't manufacture anything, and whatever our farmers produce is rotten before it's loaded on the ships, because the railways is fucked and the harbors is fucked. But it's not important to these black majorities. They do not understand how things work together. And they are of the opinion, the masses are of the opinion, the only reason why a white guy is in a management position is because of his skin color. They have no respect or appreciation for actual skills and qualifications. They don't. And most probably because they cannot achieve it. So worldwide you see this thing that the black ethnic groups are protected with things like affirmative action. And that protection has done one major thing to the black community. That protection prevented excellence from arising in their communities. So they're their own worst enemy. And then he says, overall, what are the pros and cons of our government strengthening ties with BRICS? Our government cannot really strengthen ties with BRICS because we don't have anything much to offer to the table. And we sit with a situation, and I have mentioned in the Skidmark, and this Mr. X shot that Skidmark down as being a fantasy of the discussions that is happening in the international forums around what is happening in South Africa. And that song of Julius in FNB Stadium, that was the thing that spread the message throughout the world. So the vast majority of the people in the world are of the opinion that the South African government is pro-genocide. And they cannot change that, because that is the message that Malema sent out and Cyril condoned it. Now they've got a problem with it, and they're trying to skid around it, but they're not making really progress on it, because the idea is now solidly in the international minds that South Africa's government is behind a genocide drive. And I can assure you, most of the BRICS countries will not want to be associated with that. And then he continues, question 4. How will this affect our relationship with the West that has laid the foundations of our economy with roads in the 1800s and with over 800 companies giving jobs to our people in agreements like AGOA? Well, on this one, all I can say is, it is general knowledge that through their various proxies, the West is in full control of the ANC. And the ANC government is doing exactly what the West tells them to do. And as I've mentioned, the main attraction of South Africa for the West and for BRICS is the Cape Sea route. So the West don't really care about the social stability in South Africa. All they care about is the sea, access to the sea route and control over that sea route, and access to our raw minerals, not processed, raw minerals. But now they've got a problem. The transport system, Transnet, is falling apart. The ANC created the opportunity for the trucking industry to grow as it is, but now the reality is that trucks is destroying the roads. So they cannot really meet the demand. They cannot, because the harbors are fucked, the roads are fucked, the rails are fucked. So that's not very attractive to the Western countries that wants those raw materials and needs those raw materials. And then he mentions AGOA, and my question, and I've done Skidmarks about AGOA, is why, and AGOA is mostly affecting the farming community. The big thing is this: why did the organized farmers' unions, why were they not in St. Petersburg when that trade meeting was happening there? Why were they not there looking for opportunities in the BRICS countries? Because the BRICS countries offers much more opportunities than the West. So I'm not really sure why they want to scare us with AGOA, because what we are producing on food side will be taken just like that by the BRICS countries. But we've got this ANC cabal in charge, under control of the West, which will steer them away from BRICS, because BRICS is a major threat to the Western hegemony. So if he says we'll find ourselves on opposite sides, the reality is the population and a broad base are pro-BRICS, and the elites are pro-West. And then he comes to question 5. Will we be able to sustain strong ties with two partners on opposite sides, i.e. West versus BRICS? I don't think that is going to be really possible because we will, yes, although neutrality seems a good position to have, in reality you cannot do that because the West is a threat to the BRICS bloc. For years the West has been pillaging and robbing and stealing from the BRICS bloc. And that is now coming to an end, thanks to people like Vladimir Putin. It's coming to an end. And to try and sit the fence is not going to be a good thing. The country needs to either commit to the West or commit to BRICS. The problem is if they commit to the West, things will just get worse in South Africa, because the West has got absolutely zero interest in having a prosperous producing South Africa. They only want access to the raw materials and the sea route, where BRICS has got other ideas, but the problem is that the ANC policies is that of racism. The policy is the destruction of infrastructure, destruction of the health system, destruction of the education systems. And these are all things that the other BRICS countries are busy building up. And if you look at how China is investing in infrastructure, in China itself and in all the other countries that they have influence in, it have to make you wonder, where is South Africa going to end up? It is my opinion that once the new members are into BRICS, South Africa's prominence in BRICS is going to diminish dramatically, because the South African government policies are against everything the other countries in the BRICS bloc is doing. So South Africa is the outcast there. And I've also mentioned that as far as I'm concerned, after the new countries has been brought into BRICS, BRICS will be what it is, just an acronym. That letters is no longer going to be seen as really important. And at this point in time, South Africa is enjoying some prominence in the BRICS group, primarily because it's a black representative in that group. But those days are over. Those days are really over. And as I've said, we cannot maintain strong ties with both sides. It's impossible in the climate that we are today, the political climate. Then question 6. Over and above all these, how will BRICS benefit us in solving our biggest and number one problem in South Africa, the problem of poverty, inequality and unemployment? Now there I can do a whole Skidmark just on that, because point number 1, the unemployment is due to the destruction of our industrial base, and a destruction done by the ANC. A destruction in which one of the major tools for that destruction was BEE. So that unemployment is a self-inflicted injury. And then he talks about poverty. The poverty is because of the unemployment. So the unemployment has triggered the poverty. They cannot fix it, because most of those skills that drove the industry and the industrial base has left the country. So they've got a major problem with that. And as I've said in previous Skidmarks, there's 17 million children at school-going age, 8 to 18, of which we know 80% of them will not ever get proper education. So they will go into the so-called employment market, unemployable. So BRICS cannot solve that. The country must solve that. And as I've mentioned in one of my responses to him, is that you must understand, the ANC fucked 3 generations of children's future up. To fix the education problem will take a lot of effort and a lot of skills. And those skills, most of them has left. And the ones that are still in the country is unacceptable because they're white. So the black population, their chances of getting themselves out of poverty is very slim, because their government is making sure that they stay poor. That's the, and then he talks about inequality, and this inequality cock, I cannot understand it anymore. They are always hammering on inequality, but do they actually fucking work? Do they actually exploit the opportunities that the country offers? No. Who exploited that opportunities? Pakistanis and Somalis are running the township, spazas and commercial trade. Not South Africans, Pakistanis and Somalis and Nigerians. Why? They saw the opportunities, they take advantage of our open borders and they flood it into the country, and they establish those businesses in the black communities, and they're making money like hell. And the local population is cut out of it. Why? Because their local leaders did that to them. But in any case, I hope this gives you a different perspective on how I see the future around BRICS. Not everything, but the topics that I have discussed. That is the big thing. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.